We're going to talk about priorities this morning. But just to, and we're going to talk about specifically, at least my part, laying up your treasures and render to Caesar. And when Wei asked us to choose the topic of the topics that he had left to talk about, I honestly didn't have time to look at what the topics were. I saw emails go back and forth. I saw David had chosen one of them, and I really didn't get to it until later. So once I got to it, of course, it was specifically the topic about money and taxes. If you summarize it, the essence of it is money and taxes. Now, if you know, by trade, I'm an accountant. So it's not stereotypical at all that, I get to talk about money and taxes. I almost thought about maybe, dressing like that, putting some, I have the glasses, the head stuff and maybe a vest. And, we will be all set and you can get the full effect. But in any case, I'm going to talk about laying your treasures. And, I want us to read Matthew 6:19-21. And he says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin," and sorry about that, and the translation that I got was vermin, but it's rust, "destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So what is treasure? What is Jesus talking about in this passage? Can you give me an example of what treasure is, anyone? See, then I think I may need a microphone to pass around. Treasure? What is treasure? What is he talking about here? Things you own? Stuff? Anyone else? Money? Yeah. So material possessions, money, something that you hold dear to you, our careers, hobbies, sport, any of it can be treasure. Treasure is basically wherever you set your priorities, wherever we set our priorities, whatever becomes our focus. Treasure is where we spend our time and money. Treasure can be money, it can be material possessions, it can also be the use of your time, it can be the use of your intellect. So when I was speaking to, when I was thinking about this, when I answered Wade and say, okay, I'll do this, I'll do the topic about, laying up your treasures, rendering to Caesar, all of that. I was actually quite, thinking, am I really going to be able to do this? I don't know, what did I just sign up for? Mostly because, I knew that I was going to start my class. For those of you that may not know, I think most of you know, I started a program back in January. So I've been studying, and from time to time when I'm taking class, there's a lot of reading to do, a lot of things to study. So I thought, I don't know if I'm going to actually be able to do this. And graciously, Brian said, I got you if you can, and Wade said the same thing. If you cannot do it, just you let me know, and I'll spot you. But when I was reading one of the articles, the article was about strategy. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but it was about strategy. It was a business article, and it was written by the late Clayton Christensen. I don't know if you know Clayton Christensen. He was he wrote a lot of books about innovation, modern innovation. He died just a couple of years ago. Anyways, this article was about innovation, and I'll spare you all the painful details about all of the article, because I understand the things I find interesting, most people don't. But, towards the end, he had some things that were very applicable to this. And he said, this is what he said. In fact, and he was talking about, in this case, your personal strategy. In fact, you'll often see the same sobering pattern when looking at personal lives of many ambitious people. Though they may believe that their family is deeply important to them, they actually allocate fewer and fewer resources to the things they would say matter most. People don't set out to do this. The decision that caused it to happen often seem tactical, tiny decisions. Then they think won't have a larger impact. But as they keep allocating resources in this way, and although they won't realize it, they are implementing a strategy that is vastly different from what they intend. So to translate it to layman's terms, in other words, we can say that the purpose of our life is to glorify God. We can say that what we do, we can say that we, read the Bible, do what the Bible says. We can say that we come to church every Sunday. We can say that we even pray. However, where we spend our discretionary income, the money we have, where we spend our time, whatever we seek to do first, this is what we're really about. So while thinking about this, I also thought about, you have to set your treasures, our heart should be, treasure is where our heart is, but also, it's not about grand gestures. This is really not about grand gestures. I remember, in Mark 10, when Jesus is talking to the rich young ruler, and, the rich young ruler basically, says, I follow all of the commandments. I am a pivotal person in my community. I do everything well. And he was coming to Christ mostly just to have reassurance. He was not really coming to ask, what I need to do to be in the kingdom of heaven. That may have been what he seemed to be asking. In reality, he just wanted to say, Jesus to come and put his arm around him and say, you're doing great. Good job, man. You follow the commandments, you pray, you're a key person in your community, you're awesome. But Jesus looked at him with love. He must have, if he was a Southern, he would have said, bless your heart. You really think you're doing the right thing. And in Mark 10:21 it says, Jesus looked at him and loved him. One thing you lack, he said. Go sell everything you have and give it to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. And then come and follow me. Jesus saw where the treasure of the rich young ruler was. He did, I'm going to say the easiest stuff. He said he followed all the commandments, which in reality was a lie because nobody can follow all the commandments. But, he was, quote unquote, a good person. He read scriptures. He even would call himself a righteous man. But his treasure was his wealth. That is what he was really about. Even though he was doing the big things, supposedly, he was not really about God. We may think that we're working hard to provide for our families. We may think that we're doing all the things that we're required to do to live a good Christian life. But the point is not to live a good Christian life. The point is to live a bold Christian life. The point is not to live a good Christian life. The point is to live a radical Christian life. And this is not about grand gestures. To live a radical Christian life doesn't mean that you're going to do something big. That means that you do the little things every day, every minute of your day. Early on in my relationship with Jen, I was all about the grand gestures. I remember one of the first gifts I brought to her was a bouquet of flowers. I spent quite a money on it, and she almost hit me with it because she said, she didn't want that, She wanted me to, small gifts, little things, to spend the time with her, not to take her to expensive restaurant for dinner. Those were the things that she wanted, that she appreciated. And this also translates to a Christian life. We can do all the right things, but our purpose, our heart, is not where it should be. We can, give to the missionaries, those downtrodden missionaries. I'm going to make big gift this Christmas season. That's not what we're supposed to be about. Not that there's anything wrong with that, or the poor little boy that we see in the World Vision brochure. But again, there's nothing wrong with that, but the heart. That is not necessarily what we're supposed to be about. It's about how we live our lives every single minute of our day. So it's not about the grand gestures. In Hosea, God says that, that sacrifice the sacrifice, the worrying about doing the right thing and not being the right one is not what we should be about. So doing the right thing but not being the right one is not what we should be about. Hosea 6:7 says, "For I desire mercy, not sacrifice, and acknowledgement of God rather than burnt offerings." As Adam, they have broken the covenant. They were unfaithful to me there. We're not supposed to be about the sacrifices. God could care less about your sacrifice. He cares about you acknowledging Him in everything you do. The other thing that came to mind when I was studying this passage is that money, wealth, is actually worthless. It just was created by us, so it doesn't really mean anything. It's really worthless. I recently, in Proverbs 11:4, it says, "Wealth is worthless in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death." I recently hired a young lady from Sweden in my team, and it's kind of funny because I'm at the point in life where now saying young lady is not really something arrogant because I'm old now, so I can say young lady. A few years ago, if I would have said young lady, people would be like, "Oh, this guy." But now I can say young lady because unfortunately I'm at that point. I'm old now. But my back hurts if I do too much. My knees hurt. It's just fact of life. Anyways, I hired this young lady, and in a conversation that we were having with our team, just talking about different things, the conversation kind of geared towards talking about cultural differences between Germany, Sweden, and the U.S. And mainly we talked about economics, economic systems. We're nerd accountants, so that's and don't get me wrong. When we're talking about this, don't get me wrong. Don't put your patriotic hat or drag out your American flag and put it on you. We're not talking about whether it was better or worse. We're just talking about the differences between one thing and another, cultures in general and specific. But when we were talking about this, we realized and we saw that in many cases it was obvious that success here in the U.S. is more than in other places is measured by the stuff we collect. And it became obvious to us just by talking about different things. How big the houses are, how many cars they have, this and that, the boats and whatever. It was obvious that here in the U.S., the more stuff we collect, the more successful we're supposed to be. And it's not the same everywhere. Not to say that other people have it, better or right. But, that's just what it is. So, things and it's things that we cannot afford sometimes. We get the boat that we can't pay, that we have to pay in 30 years, and we have to spend the time, working so we can pay it. When we really can't afford it, it really doesn't do anything for us. We don't even have the time to use it because we really can't afford it. The big 5 and 6 bedroom house for 2.5 children. We really don't need it. And again, we spend the time working for it, and we really don't need it. Or, the 5, 6, 10 acre farm that we can't even take care of because, we don't have the time or the strength to do it. Or in big cities, we're talking about the luxury cars that people have. I remember when I just graduated from college, I went to work for a CPA firm up in New York, and I was driving this little 1999 Mazda. Remember that Mazda? And I was proud of my Mazda. And then I stepped in, junior accountant. All the other junior accountants, Mercedes, BMWs, Volvos, Acuras, and I was driving in with my little Mazda, and I was so proud of it because it was the first car I bought with my own money. But, just to say, luxury vehicles also we buy, we don't need that stuff. And all of these things, makes us work weekends, holidays, overtime, to the point that we live to work instead of working to live. All of those decisions make an impact in our lives. That's where, and that is where our treasure is. This also reminds me, and really quick, Hopefully it's not too long. It reminds me of this famous parable of the fisherman and the businessman. Some of you may have read this before. It said that a successful businessman on vacation was at the pier of a small coastal village when a small boat with just one fisherman docked. Inside the small boat, there were several large yellowfin tuna. The businessman complimented the fisherman on the quality of the fish and asked how long it took to catch them. The fisherman proudly replied, "Every morning I go out in my boat for 30 minutes to fish. I am the best fisherman in my village." The businessman perplexed, then asked the fisherman, "If you're the best, why don't you stay out longer and catch more fish? What do you do the rest of the day?" The fisherman replied, "I sleep late, fish a little, play with my children, spend quality time with my wife, and every evening we stroll into the village to drink wine and play guitar with our friends. I have a full and happy life." The businessman scoffed. "I am a successful CEO, and I have the talent for spotting business opportunities. I can help you be more successful. You should spend more time fishing, and with the process, buy a bigger boat. With the process from the bigger boat, you could buy several boats. Eventually, you will have a fleet of fishing boats with many fishermen. Instead of selling your catch to your friends, you can scale up to sell fish to thousands. You could leave the small coastal fishing village and move to a big city where you can oversee your growing empire." The fisherman asked, "But how long would this take?" The businessman replied, 15, 20 years. "But what then?" asked the fisherman. The businessman laughed and said, "That's the best part. When the time is right, you would announce an IPO, sell your company stock to the public and become very rich. And you would make millions." The fisherman said, "Millions? Then what?" The businessman said, "Then you will retire, move to a small coastal fishing village where you will sleep late, fish a little, play with your kids, grandkids at that time, spending time with your wife, stroll to the village in the evenings where you could sip wine, play your guitar, and be with your friends." So there you have it. But in reality, what are we about? And more importantly, what does God say that we're supposed to be about? Are we like the businessman? Or are we supposed to be like the fisherman? Just to be clear, as good as this story is and the positive message that it has, we're not about either of them. We're not supposed to be here on earth, and our purpose is not supposed to be to build a big empire. But we're not also about living a happy and fulfilled life. That's not what we're about. It's not about your best life now. That's not what we're about either. You know, I think Brian said that if you're looking for entertainment in the church, then you're going to find lame entertainment, and this is not a place for you. Well, I will tell you, if you're looking for us to tell you that you're supposed to live a happy and fulfilled life, then this is not the place for you. You know, you're supposed to be living a joyous life, but you're not supposed to be here to live a happy and fulfilled life. That's not what the Bible teaches. And in fact, you have, right now, 17 missionaries kidnapped in Haiti because they went there to serve. In a place that is broken down, system that's completely broken, a country is completely broken. Yesterday, a friend of a person that works at a Christian organization in Venezuela was dying with COVID because they didn't have medicine, because the system and the country is broken. And because but he was there and they had the opportunity to leave. Thousands of Venezuelans have left from Venezuela to other countries. He stayed there to serve Christ. That's what we're about. That's what we are called to. Not to live a happy and fulfilling life. So we're not called to build an empire, but we're not called to live a happy and fulfilled life either. And I hope you really understand this. In Timothy 6, 9 and 11 it says, "Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. But you, man of God, flee from all this, and pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, endurance, and gentleness." So what are we about? we're not about empire, but we're also not about happy, fulfilled life. We're about, pursuing righteousness, pursuing godliness, faith, love, and gentleness. That's what we're about. That's what God says that we're supposed to be about. And just to clarify this really quick, in Matthew 25:14, God talks about that we're supposed to be good stewards. So I'm not saying that if you make money, you're of the devil or you're sinning, because that's not what God says either. God says that we're supposed to be good stewards of what He gives us. So to create wealth is not a sin. To make it your treasure is what the sin is. So the other part is rendered to Caesar. So now this is the tax part. And I won't spend as much time on this because nobody likes to hear about taxes. It's inedible. I think it's a movie where it says that death and taxes are like the inedible things in life. I can't remember. I remember who was it? That was a famous actor was in that movie. Was it Joe Black? Maybe. Anyways, that doesn't matter. Famous movie. Okay. So in Matthew 22:15-21 it says, "Then the Pharisees went out and laid plans to trap him in his words. They sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians. 'Teacher,' they said, 'we know that you are a man of integrity and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. You aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are. Tell us then, what is your opinion? Is it right to pay the imperial tax to Caesar or not?' But Jesus, knowing their evil intent, said, 'You hypocrites, why are you trying to trap me? Show me the coin you use for paying the tax.' They brought him a denarius, and he asked them, 'Whose image is this? And whose inscription?' 'Caesar's,' they replied. Then he said to them, 'So give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's.'" If you know the historical context here, Israel was under occupation by the Romans, and the Jews hated the occupation. They hated the oppression. To pay taxes to the Romans was not very popular among the people, to say the least. They were so antagonistic to the Romans, the Roman occupation, that they saw tax collectors as traitors. They were some of the most hated people in the land, the tax collectors. What I'm going to say is possibly going to shock you, but after I've said so much, probably not. But God's kingdom is not about a country. It's not about a political system or an economic system. God's kingdom was not about Rome then or Israel at that time. And it's not about the United States of America. This does not mean that we don't pray for our country. This does not mean that we're not proud of our country. It doesn't mean that we stop praying for our government, whether it's a Republican government, a Democrat government, Green Party or Libertarian. It doesn't matter. We pray for our government because God calls us to pray for our government. But we are not about that. The kingdom of God really is about the church. It's about us, the people. And when we lose sight of that, like in some instances throughout history, we have lost sight of that, then we get into situations like the Constantine Christianity that we have long time ago during the Roman times. We get into the situations like Nazi Germany and how the evangelical church supported them. And I was going to talk about one of my personal heroes, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, but we don't have the time. We'll take all day and you'll be bored. But, so I'll spare you my nerdiness. But if you have time, especially for the young guys here and girls here in the audience, check out Pastor Martyr, Prophet and Spy. The story of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. It's a long, big book, but it's a really good read. In any case, we're not about any of that. And when we become about that, then we lose sight of what we are supposed to be about. God commands us to give to Caesar what is Caesar's. So what do you think? What is Caesar's? What are we supposed to give if we're not about political system or economic system or whatever? So what I think is we're supposed to pay our taxes. Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah, it's clear. We're supposed to obey the law. Definitely is part of it. We're supposed to contribute to our community, our city, our state, our country. That's definitely part of it, wherever we live. However, we're not to go, to war with one another on political, ideological, things, a political or economic ideology. We can have our preference, but as a church, as Christians, we're to focus on what is more important and what we're really about, which is glorifying God and living our lives for Him, getting closer and closer to Him, and making disciples. That's what we're about as a church. So what is God's? So, what is Caesar's? Taxes, all of that. What is God's? What's that? You took the words right out of my mouth. Maybe it's already in there. No. Yeah, it's everything. Yeah, God's is everything. Everything you do, everything you are. Every decision you make, not just at home with your family, but at your place of work, whatever you do, God is supposed to be there, influencing everything that you do. God is everything. God is everything.
Excuse me while I arrange my stuff here. So I don't know if I got the short end of the stick or not, because I wouldn't have wanted to talk about taxes. I'm an English teacher. Taxes, there's numbers involved apparently, so I stay away. But I get to talk about covetousness. So when I first was talking to Pablo about this topic, and he told me all the things that kind of went into today's message, I was like, okay, that's a lot, first of all, to cover in one fell swoop. So bear with me. We're almost there. But it's also interconnected. There's no way to separate it out. And when he told me he would like me to talk about covetousness and caring for the poor, I was like, again, those seem kind of diametrically opposed. But if you think about it, they are all interconnected. And so to start off with, just transitioning from some of the things that Pablo said, everything that we have is from God. All of our gifts, all of our blessings, the relationships we have. And covetousness is something that acts as a wedge between us and God. And it can completely permeate the way that we view everything that we've been given. Just a quick definition. Covetousness is a strong desire to possess something, especially something that belongs to someone else. And that could be covetousness for someone else's possessions, wealth, social status, that family, that trophy family. They've got good kids. My kids, they sin. Some other aspect of their life that seems better than mine, and I envy that. That's covetousness. And it's interesting because throughout Scripture, it's a very explicit, clear command: do not covet. Again and again and again. Why? Because it's how we're wired. That's our sin. We want what we don't have. We want things the way we don't have them. And God knows this about our heart. And so He commands us, do not covet. It ruins relationship. It breaks relationship with our fellow man, and it breaks relationship with our Holy Father. And so He says again and again and again. And I found this verse really stood out to me in Luke 12:15. A lot of times when we think of coveting, if you think back to the Ten Commandments, do not covet your neighbor's wife. And we think also about wealth, especially money and possessions. And so in Luke 12:15, Jesus says to those listening, take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. We say often in our culture, time is money. But I think what we mean is money is life. The way we act, the way we behave, the decisions we make, the priorities we have, I think that it's a rather pervasive ideology within capitalism, this idea that money is life. Without it, how do we exist? How do we continue to prosper, to succeed? How do we show that we've arrived without money? And here Jesus very explicitly says that your life does not consist in your possessions. This created world and everything in it was made for our enjoyment, and it's to reflect what's coming. It's just a shadow of things to come. An author that I have a kind of love-hate relationship with, but Anne Voskamp, she has just a beautiful style that can be a little much for some people, including myself. But she writes, we don't see the material world for what it is meant to be, as the means of communion with God. We stay here with our focus. We stay here with our goals, with our dreams, with our ambitions. Everything is temporal. We're working 9 to 5. We're storing up for ourselves treasures on earth because that is here. We see it. It's tangible. It's physical. But that's not what this world is about. Even as we labor, that's not what that is for. Everything that we do, even the work that our hands find to do, is to glorify and honor God, and it's to point us to eternity. And when we stay here in the temporal, that's where our philosophy begins to break down. It can't be sustained. We pursue happiness with a blind pursuit, a blind ambition, and then we equate success with lack of suffering. If you think about it for just a second, a lot of times success is portrayed to us as having all the things, right? The possessions, the money. But at the core of that envy is the perceived ease of that other person's life compared to the struggle, the pain that I have to go through. They have it so easy. Again, their kids don't sin. My kids are sinning all the time. I struggle to pay my bills. They seem to never have a care. They trade out their cars every 2 years. Those types of thoughts, that's what fuels this covetous desire for things that are not of the Lord. Because that's when we're making wealth our treasure, just as Pablo said. This philosophy of happiness and contentment being found in this physical world is so fragile because we will have suffering. We will become disillusioned with the things that we achieve. And it is fueled by this rampant individualism that blinds us to the needs of our brothers and sisters. Suffering will take away the material possessions that we store our happiness in. Things happen. As Pablo read the scripture we're very familiar with, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth and rust cannot destroy. I don't know about you, but if I keep something in my closet for long enough and I pull it out again, it doesn't look as nice as it did when I put it in there a couple of years ago, right? And we use things and they get worn out. This world is meant to wear out. This is, again, it's temporal, right? It's temporary. If we are looking for a lack of suffering to determine our happiness and contentment and stave off covetousness, then our stuff isn't going to do it. And disillusionment, when we finally achieve the things that we have worked so hard for, that we have gone just sacrificed for, we often feel discontentment, don't we? We often feel a little bit of disillusionment, even when it's something that we worked really long and hard for. I teach high school English, and a lot of times when I'm describing disillusionment in the American dream in the early 20th century, I talk about, that feeling when you were a kid at Christmas, and you woke up and you were like so excited, it was bursting out of your pajamas. You go down, you open all your presents, and you got everything you asked for. And then the emptiness sits in, right? And just like that, you look at all the things that you asked for, that you wanted to play with, or that you wanted to have, all the new clothes or the new phone or whatever. And just like that, it's not enough. Just like that kind of depression, right, sets in. And that disillusionment, again, even if it's a good thing that we're working for, if we lose sight of the fact that what we're working for is not for the here and now in this temporal world, it will not satisfy. And we will become disillusioned with that, and that effort will be in vain. And one thing that I really have thought a lot about We live in a very individualistic society. It's part of the DNA of being an American that the way we do things is that idea of, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. That's the American dream, right? To be able to be free, to do what you feel is the best thing for your life. That's something that our forefathers came here to establish. It's a very noble goal. However, the natural consequence of everyone pursuing their own individual happiness or contentment is isolation from one another. And it insulates us from our responsibility to live lives of obedience. If we're so focused on our own individual contentment and happiness, we will seek that at the cost of relationships, at the cost of our witness, at the cost of our family. So what is the root of covetousness? Now we know it's sin, but I think it's a little more complex than that. I think there are a couple different specific things that covetousness is an indicator for. It is a symptom of something more. And I think one of the root causes is ingratitude. To have a heart of ingratitude, we feel that we deserve something that we've either not been given or haven't yet achieved, and that causes us to be ungrateful for what we do have. And if we have that heart of ingratitude, we cease to see even the blessings that we do possess already, because we're so focused on what we don't have. We're so focused on what God hasn't given us yet that we fail to see what He has. Contentment is a habit. It's learned behavior. It's not something that we're born with, right? That's against our sinful nature to be content. Even Paul himself says, I have learned to be content in every situation. And he's writing this to the Philippians from prison where he's been beaten. He's already gone through a couple shipwrecks, all the different things that he has gone through. And he says, I have learned to be content. Because it's a practice, it's a habit, it's a mindset. I think another root cause of covetousness is mistrust. Or maybe misplaced trust is a better way to say that. We don't trust God. We covet because we don't trust His power to provide. Because we don't trust His goodness. That He's a good God who gives us good things. Even if they're not what we asked for when we asked for them. We mistrust His intimate knowledge of our lives and what we need, and we distrust His love for us as a result. An outpouring then of that mistrust is, I think, a self-reliance, a sinful self-reliance. Well, then I'm going to have to just take. I'm going to grasp for myself. And it's a way of self-protection, isn't it? Because if we are vulnerable with God, we wait on His timing. If we're vulnerable with God, we wait for His provision. If we're vulnerable with Him, we relinquish our control and our self-reliance. But if we don't do those things, then we're protecting ourselves. We're protecting ourselves from our perceived pain. And that leads me to my third point. I think that another core symptom for the symptom of covetousness is fear. Fear of pain, fear of loss, fear of hardship, fear of suffering. We desperately fear suffering. And there are a lot of things we will do without ever thinking about it consciously in order to protect ourselves from feeling pain. We covet the ease we perceive that other people have, that their lives seem so easy, their lives seem so simple. We covet that and it embitters us. We allow it to keep us from seeing the gifts that God has given us, and even from using then those resources that He has gifted us for the benefit of the body and those around us. If we're not acknowledging what we have, we're not going to use it to bless others. Again, we're too focused on what we're missing. As Pablo mentioned, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And we see that evident in our lives. Where are we spending our money? Where are we spending our time? What are the different influences that we're allowing into our lives? Tim Keller says, happiness is not obtained by controlling your environment, but by controlling your allegiance. When we control our environment, we're trying to build up that appearance of success. We're trying to control the level of pain and suffering that we may have to encounter. That's controlling our environment, and it doesn't work. It does not work. We fool ourselves if we think we have control over those things. But if we are controlling our allegiance, if our priorities are in line with God's, if our priority is the gospel and living that, like Pablo said, not in grand gestures, but day by day by day, those little things, every moment of every day, then that's where our allegiance lies. And that's where we see, St. Augustine called it that reordered loves, right? Where God is the most important thing, He is our top priority, and His gospel and His truth will flow from us, because out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. So the words that I say and the actions that I do with my hands will be by Him and for Him and through Him. Covetousness, on the other hand, hinders us from this obedience and from putting our faith in action. I'm not going to read this passage from Matthew, but it's probably familiar to many of you. The opposite of coveting is generosity. The opposite of ingratitude is gratitude. And when we have grateful hearts and when we are generous, that's our faith in action. And Jesus says here in Matthew that the king will say, when I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was sick, you visited me. When I was in prison, you visited me. And so therefore you will enter the kingdom. And they said, Lord, when did we ever do these things for you? And he says, in response, you did these things for the least of me. You did them for me. Who are the least of these? Think about for just a moment, who are the people in your life who are hungry? Who are the people in your life who are thirsty, who are sick, who lack in some area of their life? Maybe it's just an emotional need. Your time, your care, your love, your compassion. These are the least of these. And they're all around us. I don't think we have to look too far to see people who need a little bit of hope and a little bit of love. And we have both of those things. So then how do we care for them? How do we use the freedom we have in Christ to care for those in need? We received a message that a friend of ours from Radius Whitenall had passed away last week. His name was Dick Ryerson. And Dick and Barbara were amazing believers of Jesus. He worked hard. He was an accountant by trade. He was a CPA. He worked long and hard to provide for his family. But he was always active in the church. And when he retired, he spent his time building the kingdom. He enjoyed things like vacations and hunting, and it's so funny. The one time that Pablo has ever regretted not going hunting was going with Dick, just so that he could spend more time with this man who so oozed the Holy Spirit. Every conversation you left feeling encouraged. You left knowing that this man knows Jesus, and he's been with him recently. And Dick used what resources he had to fund missions overseas and domestically. He used his hands in his retirement to help build for those who didn't have. And he was forever looking for opportunities to further the kingdom. That's how we use our freedom. And those moment by moment little decisions every day, how we order our priorities and how we build relationships. So as we care for the poor, it's very, there are two things that we do in order to care for the poor. The first is very simple. Share what you have. Hebrews 13:16 says, share what you have with other believers, with those in need. And in Luke 14:13, Jesus talks about how when you have a dinner party, don't invite your friends who will then return the favor to you by inviting you over to their house, but invite the people who have nothing, the people who can't return the favor. And it's not that you can't get together with your friends. That's not what Jesus was saying. He's not saying that we shouldn't. I mean, it's a beautiful thing, that Southern hospitality. Like, if I have someone over, I know I get to go over their house soon too, because it's a beautiful community that we have. But what Jesus' point was, we don't do things because of what we're going to get out of it. We don't serve others because we expect to be served in return. That's not the point of service, and that is not how we care for the poor. And when we do care for them, there's a reason. The world sees this, and it is evidence of his love in us. 1 John 3:17 and 18 says this: "If anyone has material possessions and sees his brother in need but has no pity on him, how can the love of God be in him? Dear children, let us not love with words or tongue, but with actions and in truth." So it's evidence of God's love in us when we serve the poor, when we give to the poor and care for them. It's also evidence of our faith. James says in chapter 2, verse 14 to 17, "What good is it, my brothers, if a man claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save him? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to him, 'Go, I wish you well, keep warm and well fed,' but does nothing about his physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead." We don't preach the gospel to hungry people and say, "Here's Jesus, he's the bread of life, he's all you need." We feed the children or the people, and then we say, "And here's the bread of life, he is all you need." It's a both and, it's not an either or. And it's evidence of our faith in action when we do that. I mentioned before that as Jesus warns in his instruction about the dinner party, right? That it's not about getting something out of it. It's not about what you get returned. Dorothy Sayers, one of my favorite English authors, wrote, "The moment you think of serving people, you begin to have a notion that other people owe you something for your pains. You will begin to bargain for reward and to angle for applause." We don't think, okay, I'm a good Christian. I went to church this week. Check. I read my Bible twice. Check. I prayed. Yeah, I prayed. Check. Okay, now I'm going to go serve. It's not a checklist. It's a lifestyle. And as soon as we begin to think of it as a duty, or, wait, who else is going to be there? Oh, no one else is going to be there. It's just going to be the leader. No one else will see me there. Those are the thoughts that creep in, and that's when we've lost it. That's when we've made it about us instead of building the kingdom. But it's always for his glory, right? Matthew 5:16, "Let your light so shine before men that they see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven." But we do all of this with a grateful heart. Remember, the opposite of covetousness is generosity, and the opposite of ingratitude is gratitude. And we do these things with a grateful heart. Mother Teresa wrote, "The work we do is only our love for Jesus in action." If we do it to Jesus, if we do it for Jesus, if we do it with Jesus, that's what makes us content. When Paul says, "I have learned to be content in all situations," it's because he does things for, in, through Jesus. To build the kingdom is all the motivation we should need. So to just summarize the whole thing, if the Son has set you free, you are free indeed. Free to not covet. Free to be generous. Free not to have a heart of ingratitude, but free to have a heart of gratitude. Free from the fear of pain and suffering that tempts us all. But to walk boldly in that freedom, radically, as Pablo said. Covetousness leads to oppression, but by the power of the gospel, we are free from covetousness. We are free to be generous and to hold the things of this life with open hands as a living sacrifice.